My thanks to Stephen Crowder and to Tim Miller. We're going to go to the next stage of our debate now and begin with a bizarre new Harris campaign ad voiced by Julia Roberts, which urges women to secretly defy their MAGA husbands.
Your turn, honey.
In the one place in America where women still have a right to choose, you can vote any way you want, and no one will ever know.
Did you make the right choice?
Sure did, honey.
Remember, what happens in the booth stays in the booth. Vote Harris Walls.
Well, the subtext appears to be that women aren't capable of making their own minds up and own decisions, and even worse, that they should be afraid if they do so. Here to debate that and more, a panel of a man and a woman who are certainly not shy about their politics. Brian Tyler Cohen, host of No Lie, and Sage Steele, the host of the Sage Steele Show. Well, welcome to both of you. Brian, I got to say, I found that ad patronising and nauseating. And if I was a woman, I'd be like, sorry, what?
I think that we are defying reality or denying reality. I think we're denying reality if we are sitting here and pretending that there is not a culture of misogyny in the United States. If you're offended by that ad, can you actually not tell me that you're not more offended by the fact that Republicans have stripped women of their bodily autonomy in this country? Is that really what we're pretending that we're upset with? I mean, we have J.D. Vance, the vice presidential nominee right now for the Republican Party, who has gone on some tour across the country where he's called women who don't have kids childless cat ladies, who's attacked them, who's denied the legitimacy of families that don't have children. I mean, can we really say that we're more offended by that ad than the reality of the situation on the ground in the U.S. right now?
Let me just ask you, Brian, if the Democrats are the party of fairness and equality for women and are the standard bearers and flag wavers of women's rights, why is it that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris continue to support trans athletes competing in women's sport, which everybody knows is a grotesque attack on women's rights to fairness and equality? I'm bemused.
Piers, again, the same concept applies. The number of people that are A, worried about that in this election, and B, that actually impacts. Again, if you are worried about trans athletes, how are you not talking about the issue of women's bodily autonomy, of their reproductive freedom, of Republicans' threats to block women from traveling between states in this country? I mean, you try to have it both ways, where you pretend that the trans issue is something that upsets you to the ends of the earth, and yet
it does.
That impacts how many Piers, how many people does that impact in this country?
Let me
how
ask
is
you a
that
question.
actually something?
I love the way that Democrats like to pretend nobody cares, one, when they do, and secondly, it has no real impact on women's sport. The United Nations last week, the United Nations last week came out with a report that said that around the world, 900 medals had been deprived from going to biological women because they had gone to trans athletes in women's sport. 900. That is not a small thing. That is an erosion of women's rights around the world, and it's being promoted in the United States by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So when they position themselves as we are for women's rights, I say, as we would say in Britain, to a point, Lord Copper, because you're not when it comes to women's rights in sport. And there is an absolute conflict there. Let me bring in Sage here. I mean, Sage, this is where I think there's a real contradiction. How can you be for women's rights on abortion, but not in sport, for example?
It's completely hypocritical, just like what happened with the vaccine and that forced mandate, which I had to do to keep my job as well at Disney. So my body, my choice when it's convenient for you. And again, hashtag science, right? There has never been an issue that is this black and white. Brian, we can go back and forth and debate on the vaccine and the efficacy of it and all that. Did it help? Did it not? How many? There has never, ever, in the history of this universe, been an issue between men and women. And all of a sudden, well, I don't know, XX, XY, and it's okay if he has this and that. Stop it. And at the end of the day, it's actually much more. It's almost 1,100 now, Piers, and this is just from a couple of days ago, trophies that have been taken away from women or girls. But that doesn't count on the lower levels where there are no trophies given out per se. We're talking about Olympic boxing and stuff like that. But when you look at, junior high school track scholarships, you got to finish in the top 3 to go ahead to state. But now you're 4th because I live in the state of Connecticut, where one of the major lawsuits first came from 5 or 6 years ago. Actually, a young woman I live next door to. This is happening everywhere, but you don't want to talk about it because you know deep down, you're not going to admit it, but deep down you know that it's wrong. And I also think it's interesting that you go with this low-hanging fruit and all those talking points of the childless cat women from 4+ years ago, completely out of context. At the end of the day, stick with the facts. By the way, I'm not offended by that Julia Roberts stupid commercial. Like I think it's so lame, and it is very condescending. Like I'm afraid to tell my husband, my boyfriend, my partner, whatever it is, who I'm going to vote for and just be quiet about it. Like stop it. And most importantly,
do you think that
is the only issue? Why is that the only issue that you guys are focusing on? Abortion, women's rights. Have things changed? Yes, but there are plenty of states that have 0 restrictions where you can do it up to the moment the baby's born, and I guess you're okay with that.
Do you think that ad is more offensive and more condescending than women's bodily autonomy being stripped away? Are you more offended by that ad than the actual reality on the ground?
Well, maybe because of the fact that women's bodily autonomy is not being stripped away. It has never been part of the Constitution. It never has been.
There isn't an abortion desert in the South. There isn't
there
abortion
are more
bans in the South.
restrictions.
Women are
there are
able to
more
go get abortions
restrictions,
in the
yes,
South?
but it also, there are more, you asked me a question to let me answer. There are definitely more restrictions depending on where you live. There are also many states where there are fewer restrictions, #none, where you can do it up to the moment a baby is born. And even in some cases, we have seen after. So let's not act like it's only one way. There are less restrictions in some states,
which
10,
cases
11,
have we seen?
And then there's many others where there are so many more. This has been through the years. This is before Dobbs, by the way. There's so many things. But tell me why this is your only issue. Tell me why this is your only issue, Brian. Why is this your main focus? How about the border? How about the economy? How about endless wars across the pond? Like that's the stuff that by the way, black voters, Hispanic voters, everyone's talking about is the economy. This is the one thing, because that's the only thing that you think you can quote unquote win when this country is falling apart and people don't feel safe.
Which cases have we seen abortions happen after the baby's born? Because you just said that, so I'm curious where that's happened.
It happened for sure in Colorado. I believe it also happened in Minnesota. I'll be glad, and you know what? I'm sure Piers can connect us.
I mean, educate me.
I'm sure Piers can connect us. I'm sure Piers can. There were babies left
so you have no
on
proof.
the table.
You're just saying you're sure it's happening in Colorado. Give us the proof. There are a lot of viewers. We'd love to know where babies are being executed after they're born. We would love to know where babies are being executed after they're born in Colorado. Let us all know.
I just told you, and I don't know how you define executed, but left to die. That has absolutely happened before, and it is something I talked about with RFK Jr. on my podcast several months ago when it was late-term abortion, all that whole debate. Again, I'm sure Piers can connect us. I'll gladly go back and forth with you because I respect the hell out of you. At the end of the day, my question for you is, isn't there more? How about the topics that I listed that you completely ignore in the border and 10.4 million minimum people coming over the border? That's who we know about.
I'd love to
not
talk
the other
about
people
the
that have
border.
got. No, but you don't talk about that. You're talking about women's autonomy. And by the way, I'm a woman. You're not. Focus on the other things as well as that, because there's so many more important things and you know it. But because you guys are stressed out about how this campaign is going, you're focusing on that one issue, abortion, abortion, abortion. How about protecting our borders so those young girls don't have to make that kind of a choice if something bad happens when a criminal comes across the pond and hurts them or rapes them? Focus on that.
It's so bizarre to say that I can't talk about the issue of abortion when it's one of the most, if not the most important issues that Americans are voting on right now. And you want to talk about women getting raped by people coming across.
No, I'm talking about all of it.
Let me finish my one sentence, please. I beg of you.
I'm talking about all of it.
You spoke. I sat here quietly while you spoke. If you're not going to let me speak, then what's the point of this? You just said that you want to talk about. You said that you're worried about women getting raped by people that come across the border. And then what? And then not being able to exercise their bodily autonomy? Again, like all of these issues are connected, but you don't want to talk about the issue of bodily autonomy, even though it is the most important issue that Americans are facing right now, even though in 2022, 2023, even though in 2022 and 2023, Republicans were losing on this issue in places like Ohio, Kentucky, Kansas, and Alabama, and yet you're pretending that it's not an issue. You want to talk about the
I'm not pretending, Brian. I promise you. I'm not pretending, but I want you to look at it. Let me ask. I know you studied that.
Let me jump in.
That's not the number one issue.
Let me jump in. Let me ask Brian. Here's what I'm curious about. Because take Europe, for example. In Europe, there are a number of countries where it is illegal to have an abortion at all. Conversely, there are countries like the UK where, say in England, I think it's a 24-week term limit, right? So there are all sorts of varying abortion laws through Europe, but it's nowhere near the tinderbox issue that it seems to be in the United States of America, which is the equivalent, if you like, of Europe. Why are you so opposed as an American to the principle of taking an issue like that back to the States?
Because this is the first time that a personal freedom, a right, has been rolled back in the United States in our history. We have never had an instance where women had rights before and then they've been rolled back by people who are trying to impose some theocratic edicts onto this country. It should not be up to a politician to insert themselves between a woman and her doctor. That's it. I mean, it's as simple as that. Why are you here advocating for politicians to insert themselves in a doctor's office between a woman and her doctor?
Well, I'm not. I personally believe it. Well, hang on, Sage. Sage, hang on.
Sorry.
I personally, if you want my personal opinion, I believe in a woman's right to choose what to do with her body. It's not about my personal opinion. I'm just curious, as a European, where there are so many different varying laws around Europe, and no one seems to get too head up about it. It just seems to be such a hot potato in America to take it back to the States, when there are, in fact, a number of other laws, obviously, which are governed by states, not federally. And I'm just curious why this one is deemed to be so sort of sacrosanct, given that 50 years ago, before Roe v. Wade came in, it wasn't a federal law. So why are you so exercised about it? I'm just curious.
Because I believe that people should be able to exercise rights over their own bodies. I mean, prior to black people having the right to vote, they weren't allowed to. I would be worked up if that was rolled back too. Prior to women having the right to vote, they weren't allowed to. I would be worked up over having that too. Prior to black people having freedom, they didn't. I would be worked up if that was rolled back as well. We deserve rights, we deserve progress, and the notion that we should just take it lying down when those rights are rolled back defies reality.
All right, I don't think that most sane people are thinking that way, honestly. I do believe that this will always be an issue no matter what to the end of time, because there's morals involved. But again, my body, my choice when it's convenient. And I respect everybody's opinions on it. I do. I have great discussions with this with my female friends and men. No, excuse me. Let me clarify, because obviously
you know that there are states in this country. There are states in this country where women can get raped.
Brian,
there are states in this country where women can get raped, and yet it's inconvenient for them to try to exercise their bodily autonomy with an abortion.
I said this before, and obviously you took it the way you wanted to take it. When it's convenient, meaning science, following my body, my choice. So for this, but not for COVID, right? That was my point. So don't act like convenience with rape. Don't bring that in. It was when it's
Sage, let me ask you this.
Only when it's convenient.
Okay, Sage, let me ask you this. I thought Megyn Kelly made an interesting point about the Madison Square Garden rally, about it being too bro-tastic. Let's take a look at what she said.
But I'm telling you, even for me, and I voted for Donald Trump last week, it was too bro-tastic. Okay? It was. You're trying to win an election in which you're hemorrhaging female voters. Maybe when you present in front of hundreds, thousands at least, at Madison Square Garden, you clean up the bro talk just a little so you don't alienate women in the middle of America who are already on the fence about Republicans.
No, Sage, I was there. It was pretty bro-tastic. There's no denying that. You had a procession of very bro-sounding speakers. And a new CBS poll says that women are breaking 55-43 for Harris, men 54-45 for Trump. Should Trump be doing more in these last few days to reach across to potential female voters?
You know, I believe that clip was, the context of it was in relation to the comedian and the Puerto Rico comment that, of course, stirred up so much
she was talking.
controversy, and
She was talking about the whole thing.
In general, okay. I was there as well. I saw you outside just before. I think back to the women that were there. A friend of mine, Tulsi Gabbard, right, who is as classy and a strong woman as we will find in this country. Alina Habib, the lawyer. How about Melania Trump? I would have loved to continue to see more women there, but I didn't feel that in the moment being there, looking around, and especially with the, 20,000 people, at least half being women there. And also, I will say this, I have been volunteering for the past couple of, I guess, probably about a month now. I don't know if you've seen the pink jackets that Women for Trump are wearing. And I've been going around the country talking to women, supporting women's businesses. We've been going to food banks, and it's led by Lara Trump, and Tulsi's been there, and Danica Patrick's been there, and Elizabeth Pipko, and so many women who are just coming together and volunteering as women, because I think so often we're told, how can you be a woman and support Donald Trump? And there's obviously millions of women who do. And so I think it's just been really fascinating for me, never having done any of this before. I mean, this was the last thing I thought I would be doing, is doing anything political or with campaigns, but going into these communities and talking to women of color, people. I cannot tell you how many women and men, but women have come up to me in my travels, in airports, on the streets here in New York City, and just said why they're voting for Donald Trump and how pissed off they are that they're told they shouldn't, based on whatever someone else's opinion is. So I do think that they are doing more as a campaign. I do, because I'm part of it.
Okay. Brian, conversely to you, I was surprised Kamala Harris didn't fly and do Joe Rogan in Joe Rogan's podcast studio. It's the biggest in the country. Trump got 40 million people so far have watched that interview. It's a great way to get to men where she's clearly struggling. We saw that off-guard clip of her talking about she needs to get a better resonance with male voters. Was it a mistake, a misstep of her not to go to Joe Rogan?
Well, I don't know if she's going to ultimately do it. I mean, there's still a few days left until the election. I can say personally, I do hope she does the Joe Rogan podcast. To your exact point, I think it is a great opportunity to reach a lot of people. I don't think that Joe Rogan is an especially contentious interviewer. I think a lot of times he's ignorant on what he speaks to and open to hearing other perspectives. So I think that this would be a good opportunity for her to do it. Look, everything is just a matter of time and opportunity cost. Spending 3 hours in the state of Texas, which isn't exactly a swing state in the presidential election right now, as much as I hope it would be, it means that she wouldn't be able to spend that time in Nevada or Wisconsin or Arizona or Pennsylvania, Michigan, like these other states. So I do, to your exact point, I do hope that ultimately she does make the time. I think 3 hours is a big ask in these final last few days of the election. Every minute in this campaign counts. And so I think that there could be some compromise there. What I hope didn't happen is that he said, okay, well, we're either going to do 3 hours in Texas or nothing, as a kind of a way to pretend that he offered her the platform. But so I do hope that there is some compromise if she is able to make some time.
Yeah, and finally, Brian, who do you think is going to win?
I think that Kamala Harris I would rather be Kamala Harris than Donald Trump right now. But look, it's going to be tight. It's going to be close. Let's not pretend that either one of these people has a clear path right now with regard to the polling. I think that, especially with regard to the blue wall states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, I would, again, rather be Kamala Harris than Donald Trump right now. But I think, it is, if the polling has shown us anything, it's that everything is within the margin of error. Everything is basically tied at this point. So we can look at the enthusiasm gap, for example. We saw, I believe it was a Wall Street Journal poll today that showed that Democrats have a 77% enthusiasm rate versus, I think it was a 67% for Republicans. So there is a gap right now between Democrats and Republicans. Hopefully that translates to actual votes, but it's anyone's guess.
And Sage, I mean, talking of enthusiasm, Trump's put a lot of time and effort into doing a lot of these podcasts directly aimed at younger men. They've got to turn out to reward that effort he's put in. Do you think they will? And do you think Trump will win?
You know, it's interesting. I've been, I voted yesterday. I'm a recent resident. I just moved down to the free state of Florida, and I was blown away at the line for early voting. And it's obviously a Broward County, and there's many options, and people were there for hours. And so I saw men, women, kids, handicapped, minority, you name it. Everybody was there. I do think they're going to turn out. And I will say this real quick. Joe Rogan is the biggest podcast in the world. It is a huge missed opportunity for them to put parameters on it. This has nothing to do with not campaigning in Texas or Pennsylvania or North Carolina. That podcast goes global. It's short-sighted. I wonder what they're hiding by not having her do it. I wish she would. I've always wished from day one. I just want to hear her policies. It took a long time for us to get those, even on her website. So I think it's missed opportunity. I think Americans are seeing these missed opportunities, and I do think Donald Trump will win.
Okay. Sage, Brian, but thank you both very much indeed. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Piers.